Hi all, it's Emily Rand with ESPN ESPORTS, and I'm happy to be joined by Team Liquid's Broxah after another win today. You guys had already clinched the first seed. I know you said on broadcast that it was really about like making a statement for TL, right? Because you wanted to go in and you wanted to prove that you're the best team in NA. Why, I guess, do you feel like you made that statement, especially since this is the best win rate that Team Liquid has had, including the double lift years of past that everyone kind of considers like the TL dynasty, I guess?
I feel like on one side, it's fair to say that we've made a statement coming into playoffs because we have such a good scoreline. And as you said, it's the first time ever that Team Liquid does secure 15 wins in the regular split. But at the same time, it doesn't really feel like the community perceives it that way, which I find really interesting because I don't think I've ever been in a position going into playoffs where the community considers my team an underdog. I don't think we're considered an underdog either necessarily, but it feels like this split, no matter what we do, no matter how well we play, no matter how clean we are, no one's ever going to consider us worth anything. Like maybe even if we win the split, we're going to be talked about as the worst LCS team that ever won a split, which is really interesting to me. And it's a pretty funny narrative that everybody around the scene has started. But all in all, if we look at the game against TSM, I feel like we played pretty well overall. We definitely could have played cleaner. The game was pretty close. There were a bit too many 50-50s for my taste, but at least some of the ones in the early game went in our favor, and that gave us a higher chance of winning. But it feels good cleaning TSM. Would have preferred it a bit cleaner though.
Why do you think the community has developed that narrative of like basically it's like TL is good, but ...
I'm not sure, honestly, because I feel like it would be easier to understand if it was only fans that perceived it that way. Like, let's say if some of the TSM fans, some of the rival fans were after us, or some of the C9 fans didn't like us taking the first place. But in this case, it's also people on the broadcast, it's casters, it's analysts, it's almost everybody around the scene, right? And on one side, I kind of understand it because some of our wins haven't looked that clean. Some of them were really close. We had quite a few 40-plus minute games against some of the bottom teams, but we would usually come out on top in the end, right? And I feel like that's also worth something because most of the top teams, I mean, all the top teams have had pretty poor performances, pretty poor games, both against top teams and bottom teams, and we've just been able to always keep our composure and stay focused and actually close out the games when it matters the most, when the pressure is at its highest. And of course, it sucks that we don't win in 20 minutes every game, but at the same time, just managing to actually secure the victory is what matters the most. And yeah.
So one of the things that you kind of hinted at in your previous answer is that you guys are able to keep your mental composure. And if something bad happens, like say your early jungle pathing gets messed up, bot lane's getting a 2v2 kill on their own, or, Jensen's winning a 1v2 in a side lane when you guys are down, or you're winning a 50-50 smite at Dragon or Baron. So what is it like to have that kind of trust in your teammates that you guys will be able to either come together or have these individual performances that will earn you a win?
It feels really great being in a team where everybody simply trusts each other so much. If someone is having a bad game, like let's say, for example, the game against Immortals where I was playing Volibear, me and Impact communicated about the top gank. I went in, I died. They didn't get first blood actually because bot lane got that 2v2, but they killed me, and it wasn't really the great start to the game, right? But the first thing that went through my mind in this moment was obviously I was a bit frustrated about the mistake, but then I realized as long as I just stay mentally strong, as long as I play well, as long as I don't keep dying, it's going to be fine because I trust all my teammates. I knew it was just going to be a matter of time before each and every one of us, or one individual in particular, would step up and make a play to get the game back in a good situation. And that's often the mindset. I feel like if someone is having a poor start, if someone makes a mistake, that person knows that the others will make up for it and will carry the game. And being in such an environment and having so much trust among each other and just being able to constantly help each other both in and out of the game, helping with anything from small mechanical related things to bigger macro decisions or whatever individual decisions has been a really big part of why we've seen so much success this summer split for sure.
How would you characterize TL's play style right now?
I feel like our play style, it reminds me quite a lot, maybe a bit too much to be fair, about one of the old school LCK teams, this old school Korean style. You know, back in the day, I remember my first Worlds in 2017. You knew that when you went up against the Korean team, it was lost. You had no chance of winning back in the day where Korea was still absolutely unbeatable. And that was because the Korean teams were just so smart. They didn't take any big gambles, didn't take any risks. They just played their own game, played really smart, played so well as a team. And no matter what you did, like even if you found a lead against them, it was just a matter of time before they would outsmart you, out macro you, and just play better either as individuals or most often as a team, right? And obviously, I don't think we're at that super world-class level yet, but that's kind of how I feel like our style is, where we have some playmaking. I feel like we all are really good individually, but at the same time, we don't necessarily have to go for those big plays in order to come out of on top. Oftentimes, just playing really slow and really smart and controlled is what brings us home the victories.
So the reason why I laughed initially is because I interviewed you before the split even started. And one of the things you said was that you really want to work on like early game proactivity because it's a weakness a lot of NA teams have just generally, right? Like if you can be super early proactive, it'll actually give you a leg up against a lot of teams if you can close out the game. How would you rate that now, having gone through a season with TL and having described their play style like you just said?
So that's a really interesting question, actually, because that's something that has gone through my mind almost weekly, the split, honestly. After every weekend of LCS, I would think to myself, how proactive were we in the early game? How proactive were we as a team? And am I happy with how proactive we've been? And for a decent part of the split, I wasn't really super satisfied with our proactivity and my own proactivity. And I mean, to go back to the previous question, if you characterize our team right now, that old LCK style definitely is how I would characterize our team. And I am pretty happy with that to an extent. But at the same time, I also feel like if we look back at the past weeks, we have started playing a little bit more proactive. We have started finding more ganks, more opportunities, started having more control around the early objectives like Drake and Herald. And we're not giving the opposing team as much room to play anymore. Perhaps sometimes we are still giving them way too many chances to get a lead or to stay in the game, but we're trying to be a bit more proactive. And while I'm happy with our growth and all, I feel like in that regard, we definitely still have a bit of work to do.
So speaking of that, like the kind of the early proactivity versus execution, closing out the game, like stifling people out. What do you think TL would have to shore up in order to be a world-class team, like in order to actually perform on a world stage?
I feel like being able to take the game into our own hands, just playing our own game, remaining not necessarily full on aggressive, but just remaining smart and controlled is the most important part. And I feel it's honestly hard for me to say if we do need to be a lot more proactive, if we do need to be more aggressive in order to keep up with some of the teams. It could be that the likes of LPL will just roll over us with this current style. I guess that's something Scrims would tell us at Worlds if we do make it to that point. But to an extent, I'm pretty confident in our team. I'm pretty confident going into playoffs, and I think if we make it to Worlds, even if we think we need to adjust a bit here and there, which may or may not be the case, we're going to have enough time to adjust, because usually there's weeks, if not even a month of boot camping ahead of Worlds. So many things can change. And I've tried to be in a situation before where I thought we were going to play one way at Worlds, then you end up in a boot camp, you get smashed by every team, and then you change up everything going into the tournament. You never really know what's going to happen.
And then lastly, I know obviously spring split was really tough for you. But what has this year been like on Team Liquid compared to last year on Fnatic?
This year on Team Liquid has been a pretty weird one in a lot of ways, I would say. It has been quite a roller coaster for sure. And a big part of that has been out of our control. It has been due to
Yeah.
visa issues, the pandemic. Some of it was in our control with Spring Split being a failure and all. And now the big comeback. So generally, when I think of this year, I think of a massive roller coaster of emotion that seems almost endless. But at the same time, I really have enjoyed the atmosphere and the environment here in Team Liquid. Everyone has been so welcoming and so nice, and pretty much the entire time. And I've been taking really good care of here. Everyone just has put so much trust in me. And all in all, I've really enjoyed the decision. I'm really happy about the decision I made joining Team Liquid. Because even with some of the stuff that happened and the failure in spring, I don't really have any regrets coming here because there's just been way too many positives to outweigh the negatives.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. And yeah, obviously a lot of that stuff was out of your control. All the best prepping for playoffs. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
You're welcome.
And for more League of Legends coverage, keep it here on ESPN Esports.